Chapter 6, Text 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karoti Yaha Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sasanyasi Cha Yogi Cha Naniragnir Nachakriya. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. The Lord said, Anashrita without taking shelter, Karma Phalam of the result of work, Karyam obligatory, Karma work, Karoti performs, Yaha one who, Saha he, Sanyasi in the renounced order, Cha also, Yogi mystic, Cha also, na not, ni without, Agni fire, na nor, Cha also, Akriya without duty. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. Purport. In this chapter, the Lord explains the process of the eightfold yoga system is a means to control the mind and the senses. However, this is very difficult for people in general to perform, especially in the age of Kali. Although the eightfold yoga system is recommended in this chapter, the Lord emphasizes that the process of karma yoga or action in Krishna consciousness is better. Everyone acts in this world to maintain his family and their paraphernalia, but no one is working without some self-interest, some personal sense gratification, be it concentrated or extended. The criterion of perfection is to act in Krishna consciousness and not with a view to enjoying the fruits of work. To act in Krishna consciousness is the duty of every living entity, because all are constitutionally parts and parcels of the Supreme. The parts of the body work for the satisfaction of the whole body. The limbs of the body do not act for self-satisfaction, but for the satisfaction of the complete whole. Similarly, the living entity who acts for the satisfaction of the Supreme Whole and not for personal satisfaction is the perfect sannyasi, the perfect yogi. The sannyasis sometimes artificially think that they have become liberated from all material duties, and therefore they cease to perform agnihotra yagyas, fire sacrifices, but actually they are self-interested because their goal is to become one with the impersonal Brahman. Such a desire is greater than any material desire, but it is not without self-interest. Similarly, the mystic yogi who practices the yoga system with half open eyes, ceasing all material activities, desires some satisfaction for his personal self. But a person acting in Krishna consciousness works for the satisfaction of the whole, without self-interest. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for self-satisfaction. His criterion of success is the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus he is the perfect sannyasi, or perfect yogi. Lord Chaitanya, the highest perfectional symbol of renunciation, prays in this way. Nadanam na janam na sundarim kavitam va jagadisha kamaye mama janmani janmanishware bhavatad bhakti rahe tukhi tvai. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor to enjoy beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. For what I want only is the causeless mercy of your devotion service in my life, birth after birth. Text 2. Yam sanyasamiti prahur yogam tat tam vidhi pandava nahi asanyasya sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. Yam what sannyasam renunciation iti, thus prahu they say yogam linking with the Supreme, tam that vidhi you must know. Pandava was son of Pandu, no never, he certainly, asanyasta without giving up sankalpa, desire for self-satisfaction, yogi a mystic transcendentalist. Bhavati becomes Kaschana, anyone. Translation. What is called renunciation you should know to be the same as yoga or linking oneself with the Supreme. O son of Pandu, for one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Purport. Real sannyasa yoga or bhakti means that one should know his constitutional position as a living entity and act accordingly. The living entity has no separate independent identity. He is the marginal energy of the Supreme. When he is entrapped by material, energy is conditioned. When he is Krishna conscious or aware of the spiritual energy, then he is in his real or unnatural state of life. Therefore, when one is in complete knowledge, one ceases all material sense gratification or renounces all kinds of sense gratificatory activities. This is practiced by the yogis who restrain the senses from material attachment, but a person in Krishna consciousness has no opportunity to engage his senses in anything which is not for the purpose of Krishna. Therefore, a Krishna conscious person is simultaneously a sannyasi and a yogi. The purpose of knowledge and of restraining the senses is prescribed in the jnana and yoga process, is automatically served in Krishna consciousness. If one is able to give up the activities of his selfish nature, then jnana and yoga are of no avail. If one is unable to give up the activities of his selfish nature, then jnana and yoga are of no avail. The real aim is for a living entity to give up all selfish satisfaction and to be prepared to satisfy the Supreme. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for any kind of self enjoyment. He is always engaged for the enjoyment of the Supreme. One who has no information of the Supreme must therefore be engaged in self satisfaction, because no one can stand on the platform of inactivity. All purposes are perfectly served by the practice of Krishna consciousness. Text 3. Arurukshor Muneir Yogam Karma Karanam Uchyate Yoga Rudasa Taseva Shama Karanam Uchyate. Aruruksha, who has just begun yoga, Mune of the sage, Yogam, the eightfold yoga system, Karma, work, Karanam, the means, Uchyate is said to be Yoga, eightfold yoga, Arudasya, one who has attained, Tasya, his, Eva, certainly, Shama, cessation of all material activities, Karanam, the means, Uchyate is said to be translation. For one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means, and for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. Purport. The process of linking oneself with the Supreme is called yoga. It may be compared to a ladder for attaining the topmost spiritual realization. This ladder begins from the lowest material condition of the living entity and rises up to the perfect self-realization in pure spiritual life. According to various elevations, different parts of the ladder are known by different names. But all in all, the complete ladder is called yoga and may be divided into three parts, namely Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. The beginning of the ladder is called the Yoga Arurukshu stage, and the highest rung is called Yoga Arudha. Concerning the eightfold yoga system, attempts in the beginning to enter into meditation through regulated principles of life and practice of different sitting postures, which are more or less bodily exercise, are considered fruitive material activities. All such activities lead to the achieving perfect mental equilibrium to control the senses. When one is accomplished in the practice of meditation, he ceases all disturbing mental activities. A Krishna conscious person, however, is situated from the beginning on the platform of meditation because he always thinks of Krishna, and being constantly engaged in the service of Krishna is considered to have ceased all material activities. Text 4. Yada hinendriyarteshu na karmashu nanusajjate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudastadocchate. Yada, when he, certainly, not indriyardeshu, in sense gratification, never karmashu, in fruitive activities, anusajjate, one necessarily engages. Sarva sankalpa, of all material desires, sannyasi, renouncer, yoga arudha, elevated in yoga, tada, at that time, uchyati is said to be translation. A person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Purport. When a person is fully engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he is pleased in himself, and thus he is no longer engaged in sense gratification or in fruitive activities. Otherwise, one must be engaged in sense gratification, since one cannot live without engagement. Without Krishna consciousness, one must always be seeking self-centered or extended selfish activities. But a Krishna conscious person can do everything for the satisfaction of Krishna and thereby be perfectly detached from sense gratification. One who has no such realization must mechanically try to escape material desires before being elevated to the top rung of the yoga ladder. Text 5. Udhared atmana atmanam natmanam avasadayet atmana evo hi atmano bandhur atmaiva ripura atmana. Udhared, one must deliver atmana by the mind, atmanam the conditioned soul, never atmanam the conditions atmanam the conditioned soul, avasadayet, put into degradation, atmana mind, eva certainly, he indeed, atmana of the conditioned soul, bandhu friend, atma mind, eva certainly, ripu enemy, atmana of the conditioned soul. Translation. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself with himself. The mind is a friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Purport. The word Atma denotes body, mind and soul depending upon different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned soul are especially important. Since the mind is the central point of yoga practice, Atma refers here to the mind. The purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and to draw it away from attachment to sense objects. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of nescience. In the material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature, and in this way, the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. The word he is used for emphasizing this point. That is, one must do this. It is also said, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayo bandhaya vishaya sango muktyai nirvishayam mana. For man, mind is the cause of bondage and the mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage. Mind detached from sense objects is the cause of liberation. Amrita Bindu Upanishad 2. Therefore, the mind which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness is the cause of supreme liberation. Text 6. Bandhuratmanas tasya yenatmaivatmana jita anatmanastu shatrutve varte tatmaiva shatruvat. Bandhu, friend, Atma, the mind, Atmana of the living entity, Tasya of him, Yena by whom, Atma by the mind, Eva certainly, Atmana by the living entity, Jita conquered, Anatmana of one who has failed to control the mind, two but Shatrutve because of enmity, Varteta remains, Atma Eva the very mind, Shatruvat as an enemy. Translation. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of the friends, but for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. Purport. The purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga system is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. The constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. But when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails the meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. Text 7. Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahita shitoshna sukha dukkeshu tata mana apamanayo. Jitatmana, one who has conquered his mind, prashantasya, one who has attained tranquility by such control over mind, Paramatma, the super soul, samahita, approached completely, shita, in cold, ushna, heat, sukha, happiness, dukkeshu, and distress, tata, also mana, in honor, apamanayo, and dishonor. Translation. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Purport. Actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personal Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as the Paramatma. When the mind is misled by external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached the destination. One has to abide by superior dictation when one's mind is fixed on the superior nature. He has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma or the Super Soul. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, and etc. This state of perfect samadhi or absorption in this state is practical samadhi or absorption in the Supreme. Text 8. Jnana Vijnana Triptatma Kutasto Vichitendriya Yukta iti Uchyate Yogi Samaloshtrashma Kanchana. Jnana by acquired knowledge, Vijnana and realized knowledge, Tripta satisfied, Atma living entity, Kutastha spiritually situated, Vichita Indriya sensually controlled, Yukta competent for self-realization. Iti thus Uchyate is said, Yogi a mystic, Sama equipoise, Roshtra pebbles, Hashma stone, Kanchana gold. A person is said to be established in self-realization is called a yogi mystic or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-control, and he sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. Purport: both knowledge without realization of the supreme truth is useless. Book knowledge without realization of the supreme truth is useless. This is stated as follows: Ata Shri Krishna Namadi Bhavedga Nabhavedga Yamindriye Sevonmukhi Jivado Swayam Eva Svratyada. No one can understand the transcendental nature of name, form, qualities, and pastimes of Sri Krishna through his materially contaminated senses. Only when one becomes spiritually saturated by transcendental service to the Lord, or the transcendental name, form, quality, and pastimes of the Lord revealed to him. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-234. This Bhagavad Gita is a science of Krishna consciousness. No one can become Krishna conscious simply by mundane scholarship. One must be fortunate enough to associate with a person who is in pure consciousness. A Krishna conscious person has realized knowledge by the grace of Krishna because he is satisfied with pure devotional service. By realized knowledge, one becomes perfect. By transcendental knowledge, one can remain steady in his convictions. But by mere academic knowledge, one can be very easily deluded and confused by apparent contradictions. It is the realized soul who is actually self-controlled because he is surrendered to Krishna. He is transcendental because he has nothing to do with mundane scholarship. For him, mundane scholarship and mental speculation, which may be as good to others, are of no greater value than pebbles or stones.